Good day. All members of the group have watched the assigned animated series. We as a group have agreed upon choosing the third episode of Japan Sings, entitled A New Hope, to review within this video discussion.
To start this deliberation, I will be stating my personal reasons as to why I chose this particular episode among others in the series. This episode in particular had good storytelling that can immerse the viewer into the complicated dramas that surround the characters in the episode. It was also a good eye-opener to the plot processes of the characters and their near-hopeless situation. The episode was good overall.
K.Rye has mentioned great points of the third episode is worth to discuss, but I am curious of the individual evaluation of the rest of the members. To speak of my views, I think the episode 3 is quite special since the episode 1 is about how much casualties Japan received, and the episode 2 shows the ruination of the capital of Japan. The episode 3 will show how the characters will cope up to this sudden change and also to cope up with the grief, fear, and their wavering hope. How about you, Bea? What's your evaluation to this episode?
The third episode is definitely a great choice, since this episode shows the characters' response to a sudden death. It revealed how each of them cope with their own emotions. This episode exhibits how individuals have different takes on a context of crisis, how the environment started to influence the behavior and mindset of the characters. For example, is the truck driver who took the situation as an opportunity to do anything that is prohibited.
That is a good observation, Bea. Next to evaluate is Kurt.
This one is very simple. The episode we choose, it has a good story but not with good animation. For me, it's like a shortcoming to capture its viewer. It's also a good show to show hope to people who are hopeless in surviving everyday life.
Straight to the point, I see.
How about your evaluations? Can you tell us about it?
I agreed to choosing episode 3 because we saw a lot of relational dynamics in it, like how Ayuma's mom coped up after witnessing her husband's death and led the others to safety and kept going for the safety of her children.
Now that everyone has stated their evaluations to this episode, does anyone have negotiable criticisms, setting aside the positive ones that were already mentioned in our evaluations?
My only criticism in this episode is that they killed off a pivotal character early with Nanami. I believe that she could have added to the story a bit more if she was kept alive for one more episode.
I have the same idea, Kairos. Nanami was a great character, but I think that the plot creators have caused the death of mentally and physically strong characters to happen so early on the episodes to convey how death is regardless of the strength of a person during disastrous circumstances. And the loss of these characters have caused the remaining characters to be more independent.
I also want to criticize how Ayumu doesn't seem to have a slightest understanding about the entire situation. She keeps on acting based on her emotions, and I think her emotions are dragging everyone down. I understand that she is traumatized by seeing Koichiro's death, but she should consider the situation first.
I agree with you, Angelica. Ayuma's attitude within this episode was really unpleasing.
But we should be considerate of her young age and how the situation is very heavy for her since she felt she was the one who's responsible for her father's death. I think that it was a realistic reaction from her.
You're right. She witnessed her father's death after all. That would be traumatizing for an adult, but more for a child, right? Anyways, let us proceed to our first objective. What are the notable relational dynamics that can be found in our chosen episode? To enumerate them, the conflict between Ayumu and her mom, the attempted sexual assault, Haru and Nanami's coping up with him, and Kai joining the group with Ayumu's unwelcoming response. What do you think is the most notable relational dynamics, Bea?
I think that the most notable one is the scene of Ayumu and her mother at the very beginning of the episode after the explosion incident. Judging from the scene, Marimoto, the mother, did her best to conceal her emotions for the sake of the younger members of the group, up to the point that she seemed insensitive towards the emotional outburst of Ayumu. Ayumu was greatly affected by this incident since she was technically the one who led her father to do that digging and that she was the closest to her father. This scene showed realism because it presented the characters as imperfect humans and that their opposing approach to this situation has created this conflict.
The interaction of these characters are up to point. Does anyone want to explicate the other minor relational dynamics?
To explain the relational dynamic between Haruo and Nanami, Haruo is introduced to as an introverted, quiet character that does not talk often and is the type of person to keep quiet and stay away from problems, rather than get involved and try to fix them. He is seen as someone in the group who is not yet fully aware of his purpose, nor one that readily contributes to mutual needs and concerns. But throughout the episode, he develops his character, and Nanami is one of the biggest reasons because she gives Haruo a new set of glasses, which makes Haruo more open to conversations as he feels more accepted into the group. And in the scene of Nanami's death, Haruo is clearly distraught and horrified as he grew closer to Nanami.
Ayumu, who has a visible fondness towards Haruo, became watchful of Nanami because of that.
Angelica, can you discuss the relational dynamic between Ayumu and Kite?
Sure, then let me expound the relational dynamic between both of them. Since Ayumu is still in denial of the fact that Japan is sinking, I guess that is why she is very worried and distrustful to Kite, who is very open-minded to this catastrophe. Kite is knowledgeable and responsible, and it seems for me that Ayumu thought Kite is quite arrogant, causing her to be irritated and prideful to accept any help coming from Kite in this episode.
Good. How about you, Kurt?
I want to talk about the notorious truck driver here in the episode 3.
You mean the man who attempted sexual assault to Nanami?
You are very correct. Let me clarify that the relational dynamic of the truck driver to the group, especially Nanami. The truck driver is a very reckless and hopeless person, which is an opposing mindset or attitude compared to Nanami and the rest of the group. Their differences had created a conflict in which is the violence and harassment the guy did to Nanami and Marie.
Now that all of us has discussed these notable relational dynamics within this episode, let us proceed to the second objective. What are the insights that each of us have gained while watching the episode? To state about my insights, this particular episode has a lot of drama with Ayumu and her mother. Because of the death of Koichiro, their father, this episode had a lot of development between the characters, especially Haruo being more open to social interactions with the help of Nanami. This episode also clearly shows that age is equal to experience, in the case of dealing with death in the situation of Ayumu. Can you discuss your insights, Kurt?
Of course, my insights about the episode of Japan Sings that it shows a new hope for the group, but Ayumu still grieve for what happened and she couldn't get lost of it. And for what I see on her, she felt so blessed that she doesn't have the courage for a new hope or a new beginning of their journey in surviving. What about your insights, Bea?
Within this episode, the insight that I have acquired is that we need to accept that life is in a constant flux, so developing a strong cognitive state will be the best approach to these difficult circumstances. Only a thin line separates life from death, a statement from Kite in this episode. Fragility is in humans' nature, so no matter how tough you are, like Nanami, it would take a second for us to lose our lives. Applying a philosophical view of determinism, we could say that we have no control of life that is dynamic in nature, but we can still make a choice to keep moving forward or give up.
I really find it interesting. The production team of this anime really did a good job in letting the characters have these interactional dynamics that makes the anime seem realistic.
Yes, I agree. Their reactions or emotional responses are quite realistic, as it shows how individuals are unique and how they influence each other through those differences.
Exactly. People have different ways to deal with the stress, pressure, and grief from what is happening to them. But some still think that they should deal with it with the same way as them. The character's maturity and the ability to adapt can be clearly seen in this episode. Marie is the most mature one in the group and also the oldest. She is the most experienced and responsible in the group, making her the group's current fortress.
I agree with you that people are unique, that we are not made to be the same.
Yes, it is less likely to be possible for everyone to think and act the same, right? Life would be nonsense. Anyway, Leon, can you state your insights?
Share my understanding about this episode. It showcases that there are different ways to cope up with the situation around them. People can express and vent their feelings on their own, and you shouldn't force them to express what they feel. Even though everything around them is turning into a disaster, there are people who have bullish and carefree mindset in this serious circumstance.
I'm glad that everyone gained insight from the episode. Let's move on to the third objective, which asks, why or why not does this particular episode show a struggle for existence? Leading on to answer this question, it shows struggle to exist on our chosen episode because they are trying to survive in the disaster that is happening to Japan, and they are trying to have hope that they will surpass and survive the sinking of Japan.
I am sure that the group mutually agrees that episode 3 shows struggle for existence. I think that this episode is where the conflict began since it was the part where their uncertainty of the future started to rise. Because of the tragic ending from the previous episode, which is the death of Koshiramoto, who is the leader figure of the group. The lack of transportation and relief goods have caused them external challenges such as the truck drivers, attempted sexual assault, and the old man's bow and arrow attack. This shows how their security is stripped off from them. Next is Lian.
I also think that this particular episode showed a lot of struggles because of trials like Bea said earlier. When a guy tried to sexually assault Nanami, Mary helped her beat the guy. And when the group arrived at the store and they looked for food, the group had to take cover because the store owner was shooting arrows. Do you want to add something, Angelica?
Yes, Lian. The characters keep on struggling to live and keep on moving to find food and a safe place. They also struggle to help one another to survive all dangers. This episode also showed the distrust of some characters to the person that they just met. How about you, Kairas? Do you think this episode showed a struggle for existence?
Of course, everyone in this episode has a struggle to be recognized and to still keep on living and existing. The best case that you can see of the struggle for existence in this episode was the truck driver that tried to rape Nanami. Since he just wanted to exist and have fun because he knows that his life might end, and in his struggle, he tries to rape Nanami, but to no avail. Also, in the case of Ayumu, where she wants her mother to recognize the death of her dad, more to the point where she gets angry. Because of that fact, these situations show that people here have a constant struggle to get others to recognize their material existence in the world. They yearn for attention much like any human being in today's world. They struggle for the recognition of other humans and struggle to affirm their existence.
That is very reasonable. You made it very clear, Kairos.
Good to know that it's clear. We have arrived at the very last objective, yes?
Certainly. The last objective for us to discuss states that how do each of us compare our insights with the insights of the others in the group. I can say we have arrived at a mutual understanding about this particular episode. People needs to accept and adapt through the changes that is happening to them and needs to have determination and hope for the future. Needless to say, people have their own pace in accepting and adapting to changes.
Mostly of our insights talk about the feelings of Ayumu, on how she can move on from the death of his father, and also what she feel about it and how can they cope up with their problems to survive.
After comparing my insights with others, I have noticed that we have the same thought about Ayumu. I understand that she is still young and she was grieving, but she should have known better and understand her situation, and not let her frustrations out on her mother. After hearing our insights, how do you compare your insights with ours, Bea?
I am pleased that each one of us has gained unique insights that are alike in some sort. Moreover, I think that the insights that I have gained are reflections to what the general message of that particular episode, such as the subject of life being constant in nature, compared to the rest of the members' insights that are more subjective to the characters. How about you, Kairos?
I think that my insights may differ in some words and some concepts, but I believe that the core of our answers are the same. Since we talked about this show extensively and we all agreed to review this particular episode.
Now that we have answered and discussed the objectives of this task, I believe that we are finished.
That would be it for this group discussion to the chosen episode, which is the third one entitled A New Hope. I hope this deliberation has made us even more insightful.
流そうご飯を食べよぐっすり眠ろうつま先まで無邪気に笑おう